It's now more important than ever to consume content consciously, becoming actually aware of how information is like sliding into your brain as you're like scrolling through like TikTok or Instagram or like Twitter, becoming actually conscious of the material that you're sliding into your mind and then finding some type of connection as to how that then like changes your reality in subtle ways. Because you'll recognize like if you just spend all day like scrolling on your phone and not really doing anything, like, you're gonna have a very predictable day that's going to occur than when, like, you have done that in the past. Like, the past in some way will create a template for how that future will be. You'll just be, like, unmotivated, just scrolling through your phone, like, nothing happened, and so, like, well, it's kind of a waste of a day. But then you'll have days where you perhaps avoid the phone, and it's like everything that's magical happens for you, and everything works out, and divine timing, and, like, whatever. And it's not to say that technology is bad, it's just, like, sometimes it's like that. And for me, that's what I've definitely noticed about my life is, like, sometimes you're in the flow, and sometimes you're not. And I think it's important to, like, when the times that you're not in the flow, to not try to go too down into destructive behaviors. Because there's a lot of destructive behaviors that don't really seem that they're destructive, but like low key, they definitely are. Like scrolling on your phone all day and like just doing nothing. And so you don't want to do that. But there is a point in time, especially like in terms of being an artist, where you have to consume like content, you have to consume what other people are doing to like know what's out there and what people are responding to then go into your own personal space to then, close out from the world and then do your own thing, but drawing inspiration from the external for a period of time to then create from your own center. And that's definitely just like how artists, I think, have to work. And some artists are the exact opposite, where they say like no external information at all. And then that's how they create their best work. And so it's different for everyone. And I think that when it comes to this entire whole game, it's all about finding how you're relating to technology, how you're relating to all the digital stuff that's going on, and trying to become as conscious as possible as to how information's like sliding into your reality. Because these things are affecting you on some level. It's definitely affecting you on some level to just to always be taking in information, watching video after video after video, paying attention to everyone's lives. I mean, at a certain point, where is your life in the context of everything that you're like sliding into your mind about? If you're always focused on everyone else, then you're not really focused on who you are. And usually, if you want to change your life, you just have to almost explicitly focus on who you are, where you are, the next step you need to take. And so I've been even thinking about how can we create content that's conscious that allows you to just actually go and live your life, because a lot of like influencers, creators, they just want to create content that like loops you into the next piece of content that they have so they can build their brand around being like an influencer that, gives like self-development advice. But often, like really, some of the best self-development is just to go and live your life, open a door, touch some grass, and just like do that. It's not always about consumption of like, you got to be an entrepreneur, you got to build a business, you got to do that. Like, you don't really have to do any of these things. You can still have a job, you can still, live in the matrix to a certain extent. And as long as you're finding your purpose, as long as you're finding your own contentment within that and not like coping hard about it, but like just actually on your own path and receiving the downloads of the universe, then you'll probably be fine. That's definitely like a path forward right now. It's happening. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Not everyone can be this like crazy person that like does everything. I'm kind of one of those people. I have my foot in everything. But would I want to suggest everyone to live the life that I live? Definitely not. Because sometimes like life just gives you challenges that are very hard to deal with. And when you're an entrepreneur, when you're building things, when you have a lot of free time but also a lot of stress, it's not really the best proper environment to like advance yourself spiritually. But for some people, perhaps that's exactly the landscape that they require to become better, is like to always be facing a challenge. And so again, it really does come down to like, well, like what's your archetype of who you are now? What do you most need to do? And then just always make sure that what you're consuming is somehow in alignment with making you become better at that, or just not detracting you away from that mission. Because you do need a mission. Everyone needs at least some type of a mission which keeps them anchored in space, within reality, to like keep them motivated to stay alive. Like we all like to a certain extent need that. And so how you're consuming content is really important within that process because a lot of how people consume content, just like mindlessly scrolling, is often like the initiations of like a mini type of depression that can start. And then all of a sudden you're sliding, like 15 minutes later goes by, an hour goes by, 2 hours goes by, and nothing happened. And I get there's like certain points in time where like sometimes you just have to like de stress from the world and do that. But I mean, it's not really the best habit to always have, right? So I've been thinking about how to create content that's incentivizing people to just, like I said, go outside and like live their own life and do their own thing, but not always trying to think that they have to be some entrepreneur, some like mega guru that has every aspect of life, health, wealth, and fitness all together. Because I don't think that you have to be all these things that you've been marketed to that you need to be, like this mega superhuman of all possible human potential. You have to recognize that at a certain degree, all the content creators, they're like the top 1% of 1% of people who are even making content in this sector of reality anyway. And so to try to emulate them is not really even the smartest thing to do because these people are so exceptionally rare that you just really don't have a chance to be on their same level because some people really are just like born different. And so it's not about creating content necessarily that's like designed for like average people, but to be very realistic about life and to also come from a point of view like having done those things and tried to live the best life, like here's what actually gives you what you really need because all the other stuff isn't really worth it as much as you think until like I suppose you get there and you recognize that perhaps it's not all that like rainbows and butterflies. And so I've been thinking a lot about how to create content that actually like aids in benefiting people in tangible ways, which gives them things to think about so they can actually like reformat and look at their life differently. Because when you have a different perspective on life, then that's obviously going to give you like different clues as to how you could like interpret the next step in your journey. And if you just go down that process and path of introspection and figuring it out for yourself, that's how you can have the most optimal sense of fulfillment. You know, that's where all the gold of your potential reality lies within the perceptual change that happens when you're just living your life, but like a year from now, how you process your current reality is much different to how like a year ago you did. And that starts to actually become the fabric, which takes on that different tone to it, which takes all the trauma away, all the pain, all the this or that or whatever. Like you just start to sink into a more crystallized form of your being, and that's like what everyone's trying to get after. No amount of money will do that. No amount of like whatever the world is trying to sell you will offer you these changes that happen beyond like even the psychological context. It's like a deep spiritual, like I said, a crystallization of your form that happens when you're just who you are and like who you're meant to be. And so how you get there is in a lot of ways, it's something that you don't even have to necessarily try to get into. Because if you're living life in the proper way, which will automatically by default like bring out those instances for you to naturally change in that way, then it will just happen for you. And so a lot of like what life is just like trying to not stress, like not being there yet. And then some time goes by and like, oop, now you're there, or like you're just 25% more there than you were before. And so now that your present state is better than your past state, like that's fine. And you'll reach like a plateau point where like you won't really have to think about your journey as much anymore because you're just in a good spot now. And whatever oscillation that's happening there that's like ruffling your feathers up or down, you're still like fine because you've already gone so far. And so for a lot of people, it's just about like starting the journey and staying motivated to continue on. And how do you like motivate people to continue the journey of spiritual progression? It's kind of like weird because when I look at my journey in my life, I was always motivated. I always was doing this. Ever since I was 12, 13 years old, I was thinking about the exact same things I'm thinking about now. Like, how can I like become my most optimal version of myself from a spiritual lens? I've always been thinking about this stuff. And so I don't really know how you wouldn't motivate people to go on this path and journey. And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong is like they want to try to change people. They want to try to like force people into the way in which they need to view their life in the same way that they do. And it doesn't really work that way. Like some people, this stuff like will make a lot of sense for, and some people like it won't make any sense. And I think in our own personal lives, we try to deal too much with how other people like don't understand us, or if only this person can like come to my point of view about a certain thing. And it's like that stuff doesn't even really matter because at the end of it, once you hit that plateau of your awareness and like you're actually in that crystallized form of your being, you'll recognize that all the perceptions that you have about anything or how you perceive another person is perceiving you will ultimately just be another one of your perceptions about anything at all. And all you need to do is really just have enough life experience to recognize that dynamic playing out, that it's just always you wherever you go, whatever you think, whatever narrative that you create, whatever instance of categorizing anything, you'll recognize it's just a product of your mind the entire time. And you'll reach a point where like that becomes so true for you that, like I said before, you have to start actually paying attention to like the stuff that you then want to put into your mind because you recognize that the mind is like literally everything. It's the theme generator for all possible reality. It's like everywhere you go, you can't escape it. And I think a lot of people they try to turn like the mind into some like self-destructive thing that like if you listen to your mind, you're it's gonna like hurt you in some way or like the new age philosophies are all about like calming the mind. Don't try to be your mind. Don't identify with what your mind's thoughts. But I would take it a step further and say that you can learn how to utilize your mind like it's a type of like cybertronic machine which is always sending you signals and you can choose to interpret certain things at whichever granular that you want to. So you can really make your mind like work for you in the sense like I need to think about something. So then you just compute data about whatever that you're trying to think about and you'll recognize that how you're prompting some aspect of yourself via your mind, you're communicating with that thing which we're all trying to communicate with all the time, like your soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it. The mind is like the interface between those two worlds. And so if you learn how to actually process your thinking in a way which is like systematic and kind of like a computer, like you're talking to your own AI within your mind, like your own chat GPT, like within your mind, you'll recognize that you'll get the answers from yourself to inform you on like a much deeper level. And that's basically, again, like all I feel like I've been doing my whole life is just prompting my own self for the answers, which perhaps I already instinctually know, but maybe I don't know like where it's located or like how to formulate it in the best way. So I'll just prompt my mind about where it's located, where's the slot located, where can I pull it into? How is it connected to other things? Which lines in the mind are creating this thought? And how does it look like further? You can start to actually think in a way which is computing information and like building a 3D version of what you're thinking. And so these things are the future projects I'm working on, like how to actually help people do that. But like I said before, it ultimately just comes into just trying to be as conscious as possible about content that you're consuming because if you're just sliding in all sorts of different things into your mind, you won't really have that compute layer within your mind to like access everything that you need to access because you have all these like data points and things that are just like there that don't provide any value. They're just like keeping up and like storing up your memory. And so it's hard to actually like access who you are, your real thoughts, like what you are, because you have all these like different things in your mind that you've watched 15 TikTok videos or like probably not 15, like 100 TikTok videos today, another 50 reels, like 4 YouTube videos. You've read like 1,000 threads on Twitter, and like, if you're always like doing these things, then like where are you located within the entirety of what you're trying to do at all? It's like you're flooded with so much information that's you're not even accessing or interfacing with you anymore. And so try to be conscious of the content that you're consuming, and you'll find that that's the first way that you can change your life is to just like pay attention to what you're sliding into your mind.